This is TWiT.
So on Wednesday, the Wall Street Journal published a story saying tomorrow the FCC is going to publish new. Now these are not new rules, but new proposed rules that will change how they treat the internet. Essentially, that will allow paid access. Everything we're trying to fight with net neutrality will allow internet service providers to charge edge providers, people like us, people like YouTube, people like Netflix, for either full access or improved access to their customers. This is something, of course, that is completely antithetical to the notion of net neutrality. The next day, they do, in fact, propose those rules, but Tom Wheeler, the chairman of the FCC, writes a blog post that says, wait a minute, there's nothing different here. This is exactly how we've always done it. And a number of, I think, fairly authoritative tech blogs picked that up and said, no, don't panic. Everything's fine. Well, it's a lie.
How is this?
It's a lie.
What's the lie?
Well, I'll point you to, I think, a very good article, and I'll let Denise comment, from Barbara von Schiwick from the Center for Internet Society and Society at Stanford Law School. The FCC changed course on net neutrality. Here's why you should care. Wheeler, who is, by the way, not only a longtime cable and wireless industry lobbyist before he became the FCC chairman, but in the Hall of Fame for the cable industry and the wireless industry. This guy... Where
is that Hall of Fame?
He's in the Hall of freaking Fame for both industries.
Yeah, where is this Hall of Fame?
I don't, it's not in Cleveland. I don't. That's all I know.
Do they have his bust there?
I don't know what a Hall of Fame is. It's a plaque.
Who even said he's in the
Hall
Hall of Fame?
I imagine it involves a plaque. But he was also made, President Obama made him the chairman of the FCC. You remember that the FCC did create a open internet proposal. What are you looking at?
I'm trying to figure out how to get to this page of yours.
Well, go to, it's in our doc. Do you have the doc? Drive.google.com.
Way to prepare, John.
I
believe Natalie has read it.
I'm in an alien machine.
I did my homework.
That's the size of a
cyberlaw.stanford.edu.
There we go.
And it is, I think, is of all the articles I've read, the clearest. I'll just set this up, and Denise, I would love to get your take on this because you've obviously thought a lot about it. According to the Journal on Wednesday, regulators are proposing new rules on internet traffic that would allow broadband providers to charge companies a premium for access to their fastest lanes. This is the Journal trying to make it, understandable.
Everything's a road.
The proposal would allow providers, Comcast, let's use Comcast as an example here because they're about to become the largest internet provider. Well, they already are, but when they merge with Time Warner, an even more humongous, powerful internet service provider. The proposal would allow providers to give preferential treatment, those words should bother you, to traffic from some content providers, along as such arrangements are available on commercially reasonable terms for all interested content companies. The FCC will decide what is commercially reasonable on a case-by-case basis. In a blog post in response, Chairman Wheeler, he calls it setting the record straight. There's been a great deal of misinformation that's surfaced. This is not a change. So I think this is an example of the big lie. If you lie big enough and boldly enough, with enough confidence, people go, oh, see, Chairman Wheeler said it's not a change. No problem.
Well, why is he saying that? Does he believe it's not a change, or do you think he's actually overtly lying? Which is what you just said.
I personally think that he is overtly lying, that he knows this is a revolving door, and just as other commissioners and chairmen, by the way, his predecessor, Michael Powell, has his old job at the National Cable Television Association, the NCTA. He's the boss there. This is a revolving door. Commissioners routinely go back to industry where they make big bucks. I think Chairman Wheeler expects this. So
you're accusing Wheeler, an Obama appointee, I might add, of corruption.
That. Yes.
Okay.
It's absolutely
I just want to get
correct.
that part straight.
Of being play to the system that already is corrupted. You know for a fact that he is greased and wined and dined by lobbyists who...
He is a lobbyist. He doesn't have to be greased. He is. And Obama appointed him, put him, the fox, in charge of the hen house.
Yeah,
all right, Denise Howell. So what this comes down to is, and by the way, there is hope. So first of all, this is a proposal. The FCC will vote on it, and then after the commissioners vote, there will be a period of public comment. This goes back to the recent court case. Verizon sued the FCC over this open internet proposal and won. And the court, and we had you on, Denise, at that time, gave them a very clear roadmap. They said the Telecommunications Act, specifically Section 706 of the Telecommunications Act, requires the FCC to allow these kinds of fees. The court said, so in other words, you cannot enforce this open internet, but there is an exception. If you declare the internet service providers to be common carriers, to be utilities, then you can block fees. You can have an open internet. Chairman Wheeler, for reasons we don't, well, I know why, but for reasons he doesn't say, has decided not to follow the court's suggestion, not to declare ISPs common carriers. And so as a result, he has no choice but to allow access fees. Denise, is that a correct summary?
You have teed this up really, really well, Leo, and it's a complicated issue. So kudos to you for doing that. Shall I go ahead and give you my take?
Yes, please.
All right. So first of all, I would like to know exactly what it is that we're talking about here. So far, we haven't seen these proposed new rules unless they were published in full text in the Wall Street Journal. I have not read the Wall Street Journal article.
The Journal released this the day before saying, here they come.
Right. So, but they haven't come. We haven't seen them yet. So there has been this whole tornado of news coverage around something no one has yet seen.
Well, now Wheeler did in his blog say, here's what the notice will propose.
Right. I think we have a pretty good idea that it's going to contain some provision for an internet fast lane.
So you're saying they never released these proposals as they were supposed to on Friday?
Yeah, I know. I kept refreshing before This Week in Law on Friday to see if we could,
If that's true, why are you so worked up?
Yeah, nobody has seen as far as I know, please correct me,
No, you're right. No one has seen these.
I still don't think anybody has,
the Wall Street Journal, I think some other operation, they got special copies because they were, and I don't know why that was, but just to screw everybody else.
It's also possible the FCC, as it often happens in government, floated what we call a trial balloon. They said, let's see what the reaction is if we were to propose this. And obviously, I hope that the reaction was strong enough that maybe they've thought better of it. Tom Wheeler, in his blog post at fcc.gov, says, to be clear, this is what the notice will propose. All ISPs must transparently disclose to their subscribers and users all relevant information as to the policies that govern their networks. That's great. They must say, yeah, we're demanding you to pay us extra. They have to tell us that.
Where does it say that, demanding?
Well, that's one of the things that no legal content may be blocked.
Right.
Nobody said it will be. And that ISPs may not act in a commercial, this is where you get in trouble, in a commercially unreasonable manner to harm the internet.
You don't think that second thing's a little sketchy?
That no legal content may be blocked?
Yeah.
Why is that sketchy?
Well, don't you realize that the United Nations is creating these rules and regulations against hate speech?
Who declares it illegal? All right.
So that there is a very nasty little thing to sneak in. I'd be more concerned about that. That's SOPA.
Exactly.
He's saying
civil illegality versus criminal legality should be taken into consideration there. Again, we haven't seen this thing. So, we're going by Chairman Wheeler's statements and the Wall Street Journal summary. I think, we need to actually see this thing to be able to talk intelligently about it. Even though no one has seen it, the FCC has opened up a new inbox for comments about its new open internet proposal, which no one has seen yet. If people have comments, they can email the FCC at openinternet@fcc.gov, and I'm sure the FCC is getting an earful. But
he says it should be noted that Title II regulation, this is the Communications Act regulation, only bans unjust and unreasonable discrimination.
Right. So his point, you realize his point there.
Yes, it has to be reasonable.
Well, no, here's what he's saying there. he is addressing let's back up to 2010 when the first open internet law rules from the FCC were enacted.
And those we liked.
Under
original
then Chairman Janikowski. Well, really nobody liked them.
Oh.
Because the people who were in favor of net neutrality did not, and strong prophylactic net neutrality did not think that they went far enough.
Right.
And the people who are not in favor of big government regulating business and having a lot of monkeying around in what sort of private arrangements businesses can make with each other didn't like them either, because they began to go down that road. So they really didn't make anybody too happy.
Which is the test of a good rule, in my opinion.
Right.
So
go ahead.
Remember, Tom Wheeler was not there then.
Right.
The open
this is
internet
Julius
rules,
Janikowski.
Right. We're not Tom Wheeler's rules.
Right.
But one of the reasons that the original open internet rules, which were taken out by the Second Circuit Court of Appeals recently, one of the reasons people didn't like it is what you've alluded to, this going under Section 706 as opposed to regulating the internet as a common carrier. They didn't do that. So what he is saying here when he says,
by the way,
it should be noted that even Title II regulation only bans unjust and unreasonable discrimination. He's saying even if we reclassify, which we still could do, but we're not doing now, but if we do it, we're still under the same standard. Only unjust and unreasonable discrimination will be forbidden. So he's saying it's 6 to 1, half dozen the other. You don't like where we are now, but
even if you declare it a common carrier, they aren't. But what I think the district court was pretty clear that if you don't do that, you're very limited in what you can do as the FCC.
Right, you're very limited in.
That's why they overturned these open internet rules. They said they're not legal.
Right, you have to go under
706.
In order to do what you've done, you have to go under Title II instead of Title I. You have to call it a common carrier instead of a communication service as opposed to an information service, and then you have more leeway.
It struck me that the court was saying to them, if you wish to pursue these open internet rules, and we think that's a good thing. There was very clear language in the opinion that we understand why it's important to have an open internet. Then you need to pursue Title II. You need to declare the ISPs common carriers, right? That seemed like the court was pushing them that way.
I wouldn't say the court went so far as to try and tell the FCC what to do. It gave the FCC some options.
Right.
It said you're either going to have to rework the rules under your existing framework, or you're going to have to jump to the other framework.
Or what you want it to do is illegal.
Right.
So they overturned the open internet rules, and we've been waiting to hear back from the FCC. Well, what is your response to this? What their response is, okay, fine, we won't have an open internet.
Well, what their response is I think here, if you read Chairman Wheeler, that the open internet will, under the FCC's rules,
he says it
prevent commercially unreasonable steps,
right,
and require transparency, but we're going to allow private deals for preferential treatment.
I want to be clear that this isn't the kind of deal that Netflix made with Comcast earlier a couple of months ago. That was a
peering deal.
That was a peering deal. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the Edge deals with Edge networks. Direct deals with somebody like TWiT or somebody like Netflix saying, if you would like fast lane access to our customers, we would like to be paid for that. And that would then, now the reason I have a very big stake in this, and I think everybody in the country has a big stake in it, is TWiT wouldn't exist if our live stream stuttered and was unusable and buffered a lot because we didn't have fast lane access. I don't care that it's commercially reasonable for AT&T or rather YouTube and Vimeo to pay $1 a customer. That might be commercially reasonable, but it's not viable for me.
Right.
And as this, I think, excellent article from the Stanford Law School pointed out, eBay, Yahoo, Facebook, even Google itself wouldn't exist in a world where they had to pay. YouTube would not exist in the early days if they had to pay. Now they can afford it. That's not the question. Is do you get the same kind of innovation? more than that, do you get the same kind of free speech? And
you know, don't you think that you're exaggerating this issue? And I'm saying that
why? Because I think Comcast is so trustworthy.
I don't really think that they're out to do evil.
What?
Overtly. I mean, it's nice to say, well, geez, the whole thing is a scam to get you to cough up more money. The real basis for this whole thing is the public itself. All they want is Netflix. Netflix is hogging all the bandwidth. Netflix should have a peering deal and have to pay extra to get on that faster lane, as it were. I hate to use that analogy, because they're the ones that are chewing up all the bandwidth. They're the ones who everybody wants to see at night after 6 o'clock. Everybody goes on Netflix. It's a known fact that the whole internet is clogged by Netflix. That's what it's about. It's about video. Yeah, you may be affected in some way, shape, or form. But I don't think that it's going to deteriorate by any means. These are private networks. We're not talking about the public internet. We're talking about the private backbones is what really this is about.
No, that's the peering stuff, and I'm talking about the edge access fees.
But I think we're pretending that the internet is a democratizing type thing when it really isn't, because the barrier to me just making a network out of my house that competes with TWiT is higher than just access to viewers. We're, by and large, a pretty unfriendly place to do business in the United States. So I think, not that I don't agree that the internet should be net neutral, but I also think that we're maybe being a little bit, what's the word I want to use? You know, we're romanticizing this.
No, I disagree. I'm going to quote. I disagree. I'm going to quote Barbara Van Schuwick on this again from the Stanford.
And let me ask you a question before we make that quote.
Utopian is the word. I think we pretend that the web is a bit utopic, and it's not. There's a great book on this topic called "The Myth of the Digital Democracy," and they talk about how it's not just as easy to start a blog or start, you know, if you want to compete with Facebook, it's not just a matter of access to speed and viewers. There's a lot more that goes into that. I'm going to put the link in the chat room, guys, for this book.
She writes, finally, access fees may impose serious collateral damage on values like free speech or a more participatory culture by making it more difficult for individuals or nonprofits to be heard or to find an audience for their creative works. Today, individuals and nonprofits can put their content online at low cost, and when it travels across the network, that content receives the same service from the network as commercial content. By contrast, access fees would create two classes of speakers, those who can pay to receive better treatment and those who cannot afford to do so, often individuals and groups with unpopular or new viewpoints, like activists or artists.
And who's proposed access fees that she's complaining about? Where are these access fees?
How do we get traffic to those people? It's not like your voice is the same as my voice. They're different. There's so much else that goes into getting an audience besides just access.
All right, that's fine. You can talk about marketing and so forth, but the fundamental right to be heard on the internet at an equal is what has made the internet so powerful. And I point again to startups like eBay and Facebook that would not exist if they had to pay for access to customers. They would not be on an equal internet. We're talking about a two-tiered internet.
Who's proposing this two-tiered access?
I'll give you an example. AT&T that is saying to... Who did AT&T...
Well, let's go with Comcast. Comcast has the business thing, and they got the regular one.
AT&T said, if you pay us money, we will not count your bandwidth against our customers' usage caps. That's the same thing, by the way. This is the equivalent of an access fee. So they go to YouTube and say... It's
not an access fee.
If you want... It is exactly an access fee. If you want our customers to watch all they want of YouTube, just give us some money. We won't count it. Pay for, in effect, their internet access. That's exactly an access fee. And it disadvantages any company that's not willing to pay that fee, because then, as a customer, I know it's counting against my bandwidth if I go see Vimeo instead of YouTube. So it totally makes a difference. And that's already happening. It's if the FCC does not get involved, you can absolutely bet Comcast goes to each and every one of these internet edge companies and says, okay, you want to have nice high-speed access to our customers, you're going to give us $1 a customer.
How about having a little more competition? Maybe these guys should stop all these crazy mergers.
Thank you to the FCC for no competition, by the way. It's because of the FCC that we have a duopoly in this country.
That is a different argument.
But it's all the part of the same argument, which is that if you do not take steps today to protect open internet access, you will not have the same internet we have today in just a few years. Denise, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. I totally agree with you that it's part of the same argument, because how you feel about market forces has everything to do with how you feel about net neutrality. If you feel like the market is capable of dictating that unfair things won't happen, because if the ISPs make deals that favor certain people and don't favor others, and it winds up damaging the consumer experience, if you believe that the market's going to cry loudly and bring pressure about that kind of thing, then you're not so concerned about the internet fast lane, because the ISPs are going to have to respond to the market, right? You also have in your camp, if you're one of these people that believes the market can fix things, the fact that we have antitrust laws and consumer protection laws that are already on the books that are there to fill the gaps in this too. If you're someone, and Baron Soka, who we've had on the show before, who is very much, I've got to say, you know, if there are people in different camps and out on the ends of both sides of this issue, Baron Soka is very much on the side that net neutrality, even the original open internet rules, went too far. He calls it prophylactic legislation or prophylactic regulation, that we're, as John is suggesting, we're perhaps regulating something that's not happening yet because we're afraid and we don't want it to happen.
I believe in a free market, and I believe if there were a free market, if there were competition, this would not be a problem. But it's also apparent that there isn't competition. And John, this is a great from Doug Ross.
I have 3 possible ISPs in my neighborhood, and I use Sonic.net and Comcast, but I can also get AT&T. There's some competition there, and this Sonic guy up here, wherever
Dane
he is.
Jasper, yeah.
Dane, he says, look, I'm not even going to take logs.
He's not. He is absolutely going to be a competitor. The problem is, it's DSL. It's coming in over AT&T's copper.
He's taking his profits, and he's digging ditches.
He needs to ditch.
He is putting fiber everywhere he can.
Good luck getting those
But you
right
live
away.
in the San Francisco Bay Area, where of course you have great choices for broadband, and how much of the country does not. And I think, to Denise's point, for those of you who think that this would otherwise shake itself out, we don't live in that kind of government. And think about all of our quantitative easing lately. We don't let things shake itself out. We legislate before it's a problem, and it could be a perversion.
I think this cartoon is great from Doug Ross. This illustrates what Comcast wants to do, which is the same exact tiering they do now with your cable. For $39.99 a month, you get ESPN, CNN, Fox, and ABC. $49.99 a month, you get Dig, Flickr, Facebook. This kind of tiering is exactly what Comcast wants to do. You can't deny that.
I do deny it. I do not believe that they want to do this. This is an exaggeration. Why would they want to do that? It's crazy. Oh, you have to pay extra to get Facebook? You think their customers are going to go shoot the guys? I mean, they're going to string them up.
I actually don't believe that you will be prevented access to any site. I think it's going to be much more subtle than that. What you'll do is get better access to the people who pay. That's all. I agree with you. And in fact, I think that's what Chairman Wheeler is saying. No legal content may be blocked means you can't say you got to buy a package to get Facebook. I think that's probably what he's saying.
Dan Gilmore has a really good Guardian piece on this on the other end of the spectrum, on the side that says, yes, we actually need to regulate here because it's not something that the market and existing regulation is going to be able to take care of. And his headline is, the FCC is about to axe murder net neutrality. And he winds up calling Tom Wheeler former cable and wireless industry lobbyist, I think 6 or 7 times in the article.
Yeah, let's make it really, really clear that Tom Wheeler is the fox in charge of the hen house. He is a guy who is representing the industry and the interests of the industry over and above the interests of us as users.
Here's what I find amusing. We've gone years and years and years and years, and there's guys in the chat room calling me an idiot. That's fine. We've gone years and years and years trying to keep the government out of the internet. Oh, God, if these guys get involved, we're all screwed. And we're just letting them get involved, and this is just another foot in the door, another camel head in the tent, and this is where it's going to head. It's not going to be good.
We're not asking the government.
When he was appointed, this is exactly what we were afraid of.
Yeah.
We can play back the tape. We were afraid this would happen.
Yes.
Dan is concerned, and I'm concerned too, about this point. And it goes to the graphic that you just showed, Leo, that with an internet fast lane permitted, what that means is the ISPs double dip. they charge their customers on the one end and the poor customers, they've been getting the raw end of the deal for so long. You know, you're promised up to certain speeds that you really don't get. And it's, you know, nobody's happy with the level of internet service that they are receiving. But they're paying for it anyway because,
for that matter.
Right. So you know, the customers are already not in a great situation, but their lot is not going to improve when the ISPs are also getting paid by edge providers who want to reach those customers. You know, what's going to happen at the customer level? You're paying for premium internet access, say, for example, but even that is not going to get you the fastest access to you know, anybody who's not also paying on the back end. And if you're not paying for premium access, what is your internet service going to look like? Not great.
Well, it's going to look like your DSL, because I think in many cases that's what you're getting is sub-premium service over DSL.
Well, this is new, because when we first started off, if you recall, and you could buy a T1 line, and nobody was getting T1 speeds. They took the T1 line and divvied it up amongst a bunch of users and said, you're getting a T1. This is bull crap.
I think that, let me ask you this,
This is not a
Denise,
new situation.
I would like to know what the legal story is here. Why is Tom Wheeler reluctant to declare ISPs common carriers? What he says, because there's no difference between Title II and Title III.
Well, I don't think he says there's no difference. He just says, bear in mind that we have a similar sort of standard under Title II that's going to govern the kinds of behavior that we can regulate.
Well, that's his weasel words.
Unjust
why
and unreasonable
you shouldn't care. You pay no attention to this. This is not a problem. But seriously, why won't the FCC is there a reason why they don't want to declare ISPs common carriers?
I think it's a political hot potato. I don't think the ISPs want to be common carriers. There are a whole lot of other regulatory concerns that come into play that they do not want to be under. So yeah, reclassification is going to be a tough sell in Washington.
I mean, AT&T is a common carrier for telephony. Mm-hmm. It strikes me that ISP is also telephony. It's also telecommunications. Right. Is Comcast as a cable company considered a common carrier? Do we know? Maybe we don't know.
A television cable company. I don't believe so.
It strikes me this is all telecommunications, and they are right. Basically, these are ISPs are utilities now. They're the electric company, they're the water company, and they should be required to treat all bits as equal. Period. I think they should be able to recoup their costs. I'm not saying that. They should be able to make a fine profit. I'm not saying that. But they cannot be allowed to, in effect, decide which is good and which is bad content. All content needs to be equal on the internet.
And I think it's so funny that they fight against being a utility, because if you look at the stock market, utilities are the things that outperform all of the fancy stuff, all the high-tech stock. They don't bubble and burst. A utility is where the money is in terms of long-term investing. So, like, why fight that?
Dr. Mom points out that if Verizon provides her with phone service over copper, common carrier. If it provides her with phone service over fiber, they're not regulated. This is a little disjoint here, and I think this could be done better. Look, as hard as this is to explain to you guys are all enthusiasts, you're all geeks, you understand this better. Imagine how normal people, this is completely beyond them.
They don't care.
You're right, John. They want faster Netflix. They don't care. But we have to care because we, as geeks, understand how important a free and open internet is. So the burden is absolutely on us, much more so, to contact your member of Congress, write to that mailbox. I'll get it again from Denise when she comes back, and say, you need to declare ISPs a common carrier. That's the way out of this. That's the way to true open internet rules. We need to enforce that. It's the will of the people, and ultimately the will of the people matters more, even to Tom Wheeler. Well, maybe not to Tom Wheeler. It certainly matters to your members of Congress more than what Comcast or AT&T thinks. Denise, what's the email address to write to the FCC about this?
One more time. It's open internet at fcc.gov.
It should be open internet ? An open FC.
Yeah. I have a question that I haven't really heard it discussed in these terms before, but it has to do with the way that internet services have changed over the years, and the way that now there's so much video content being delivered over the internet, whereas, back in the day, we were just doing our Alta Vista searches and thrilled to be online, and how that should all factor into this equation. It does seem to me like the way you price internet should change in light of all that. Doesn't it seem that way to you, Leo?
Well, there's an interesting question. How are you going to answer that without the net neutrality argument?
Because, very simply.
And let me just chime in before you do that.
Okay.
Which is, I think there should be I think it should be tiered. I think it's people who want to watch Netflix all the time should have a different fee. Essentially,
I agree, but it shouldn't be about Netflix. It's a tiering for speed.
A virtually different access path because you're watching videos all the time.
That's not illegal, and it's not against the rules, and it's a perfectly good way to run your business. I do it right now. I can pay for higher speed internet or slower speed internet. What I don't want is an internet where the high-speed internet has access only to certain edge providers. All edge providers must be equal across all those tiers. Then that is an open internet. It's not wrong or illegal or in any way immoral to say if you want 50 megabits per second, you pay more. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is I don't want to have to pay more so that I get good Netflix. I want to pay for 50 megabits a second and choose the provider I want. Does that make sense? Otherwise, you're not going to get a new Netflix. Netflix is going to be the incumbent, is going to own the market, and Voodoo's going to say goodbye.
Right. Well, there's about 40 of these guys.
Right, and they're going to all drop off because only the guys who can afford to pay, quote, commercially reasonable fees will have parity, be usable. I'm sorry, go ahead, Natalie. Were you saying something, Natalie, or was it Denise?
No.
It was Denise. Sorry.
I may be comparing apples and oranges, but it does remind me a little bit of what we went through with CARP way back in the early days of regulating internet radio, when internet radio stations were being priced like terrestrial radio and having to pay additional fees that were driving internet radio stations out of business. Again, it may be apples and oranges, but I do think that we need to be paying attention to that issue of the little guy getting hit with fees that the little guy shouldn't be expected to bear. And that in those kinds of situations, it's not so much a consumer issue, it's more a consumer protection issue. And we do have consumer protection laws out there to look after the consumers. It's more a small business protection issue.
Well, let me ask a question of you about that. Because I'm in total agreement about the rip-off that took place during the internet radio era.
Yeah. How much internet music radio is there these days?
No, there's very little.
They killed it.
Now, but at the same time, I have to say, and of course you may have accused me about this earlier, being a little too much of a free market type, if the guys who own the content, in the case of internet radio, decide that you just can't have it cheaply, whose business is it to tell them no? I mean, it just seems to me that that's just the way it is. I mean, I'm not a big content nutcase where, I got my content. Sumner Redstone, I ran into him once, and he says, "That's mine, it's mine." He's like very, adamant about this. But in fact, it is.
It is. It hasn't worked out too well for the music industry. That kind of,
There's probably more bands than ever. There's probably...
thanks to the internet.
And
thanks to the fact that they failed.
It did work out.
Yeah, unless you ran Soma.fm, then maybe it didn't work out.
And if you're a big label, sometimes it doesn't work for you either. But we've always admitted that the internet has changed things. I agree. Seeing all these books come out about the internet's changed everything but advertising, when it's exactly changed advertising radically.
It's changed everything. It's changed everything. But no, I agree with you. I am not anti-market. I think the free market, if it's truly a free market, works quite well. There's a few areas where you have to regulate, like antitrust, and there's a few businesses like healthcare where a free market solution, in fact, doesn't give you the proper outcome, and we all know that. But in most cases, a free market would solve this, but we just don't have real competition. So maybe the solution is to force the cable companies to allow other other internet service providers to ride on their wires. That's illegal right now. They're not forced to do that. The telcos are.
Well, yeah, the telcos are, and that's why I get Sonic.net.
That's why you have Sonic. Now, wouldn't it be great if somebody went to the cable companies and said, you know, you've made enough money on that ditch you dug. We're going to require you now to allow other providers in on your cable.
It would be an interesting thing to see.
You know, if everybody had 10 internet service providers, I wouldn't worry about this.
Well, in the early days, there was plenty. We had all kinds of service providers, and then they all got bought up, and nobody seemed to care.
The Tom Wheelers of the world took over. Let me tell you, that's what happened. As soon as they saw money in the internet.
Well, we should be fighting against this anti-competitive nature of these operations as opposed to anything else.
I'll accept that solution. That's a good solution. That would be.
But let me run down what Dan Gilmore says.
Dan has some great ideas. Yeah.
Yeah, because he says, don't get mad, get even. His first push is for reclassification, but he acknowledges that doing that would not be simple or without unintended consequences. Then he goes on to say what you were just saying, Leo, create genuine competition. That
community
ISPs
broadband
should have to share their lines at a fair price with competing ISPs.
The community broadband movie
is
fabulous.
And we should give it a try.
Dan Frankston is a big proponent. Dan Frankston. What's his name? Bob Frankston is a big proponent of community broadband. That's a great solution. And we have our own Malik on from time to time. He raves about his community broadband internet access. I don't think that internet service provider is going to go to the edge networks and say, would you like to be in our apartment building? You got to give me some more money. And that's not going to happen. So that's one. Competition.
What does John think about this one? The best solution, says Dan, taxpayers should pay for a fiber everywhere system and then let competing ISPs use it to compete in a genuine free market. But don't hold your breath on that one. Well, when I mentioned that on my show, Evan Brown said, oh, okay, so the government then is going to be in charge of a fiber everywhere system. Now, I'm not sure if taxpayers are paying that necessarily means that the government
the taxpayers did pay for rural electrification back in the 30s.
The interstate highway system, there's good precedent for this. Actually, what Frankston says is local governments should assert the right of eminent domain and say, you know what? Thank you for putting in all that infrastructure. It's now the utility, and what we're gonna do is let you ride on it. We will maintain it. We will charge you a reasonable fee. And if Comcast and AT&T and Verizon and everybody else want to ride on it, that's great because more competition is good. Frankston has a very direct roadmap for how this could all work, but it does require something that's never going to happen, which is that local governments develop.
No, the local governments are as corrupt as anybody. They've been bought off largely. I'm not even sure these contracts you can do that anymore, what he describes.
Eminent domain, you can do anything you want.
Seems to me that some of these cable companies in local areas should have been taken over by the locals.
But then
who's going to manage it? These guys are crazy.
I have direct experience in Petaluma. I was on the technology committee until I quit in dismay. Because local politics is very frustrating. But you know, as with every town in the country, we made a deal, in this case with Comcast, for a monopoly in this region. That's how you get a regional monopoly. Comcast has a monopoly here. Comcast promised all sorts of things. Internet to schools, low-cost business.
And they never delivered.
Never delivered any of it. And the local government not only doesn't have the clout or the lawyers or the willpower to fight it. So they're just going, yeah, well, Comcast kind of screwed us, but what are we going to do? Because I'll tell you what, you're the city council member who said we're going to get Comcast out of here. You're going to hear from every voter in town that says, wait a minute. That's how I watch American Idol.
You'd have to have somebody you'd have to have a very high-end person within the city.
I tried very hard, and there are some smart people on the technology committee, but ultimately the lack of will just really is frustrating.
Well, that's what happened kind of to me up in Port Angeles. I have the public utilities, the local government, the PUD, they're the ones who own the cable. They had the fiber. And so we had a fiber going down the street. We actually had it strung. And we bought directly from them. And then the next thing you know, Verizon kind of got their foot in the door, and they're now providing some aspect of this. And then the next thing you know, they sell the whole thing to a local company that's been kind of hogging the internet, old-fashioned internet. And now we're just this great deal that we had is like all screwed up because of these local governments that are incompetent. But that's.
Have you guys read Flash Boys?
We were just
That's
talking
what
about
he's
that before the
talking
show.
about.
I'm reading it right now. Man, is that good.
So
My
the
dad is
first
reading it. He
chapter
loves
is
it.
all about this, about how people who lay the fiber then act in a nefarious way. It's specifically about spread networks, which they worked to kind of overtly or covertly rather lay down a fiber line between the Chicago exchange and the servers in New Jersey to most of the bigger exchanges in New York. And the speed at which you can get information between those trades is like 14.5 milliseconds or something crazy like that. What do they do with that information? Like, what do they do with that cable line? Do they sell it to someone who could use it? Do they do something good for it? No, they sell it to the big banks for something like $140 million a year or something like that. And most of the banks signed on right away, no questions asked. And only one bank said, we just need to, sort of change the contract so it doesn't look like we didn't know that we couldn't use this on behalf of our customers. It's crazy town. So you think that people do really great things with this communication technology that they then own and put a lot of money into? By and large,
and by the way, the big funder on that was Jim Barksdale of Netscape fame.
There you go.
He put up all the money to lay the straightest fiber line they could possibly lay between Chicago and Nutley, New Jersey.
It's crazy because they wouldn't even go around a shopping center. Right. They would badger the owner of that shopping center until they could lay the line right through. And when the construction crew was asking, why are we doing this again? And why do we have to go straight through this mountain and, straight through this farm? And they wouldn't tell them why.
There's one drill in the whole world that can drill under the river. And it's in Brazil. And they got to figure out.
That's that giant German thing.
Yeah. So, all right. Enough. We've said our piece. Denise, would you like to stick around?
We've
you can take off if
accomplished
you want.
I would love to stick around. I would love to encourage people too. In addition to the articles we've already talked about, you put one in the rundown, Leo, that I thought was really good in the Atlantic. It's co-authored by a couple of people,
Credit
Alexis
to Chad
Madrigal
Johnson
and Adrienne LaFrance.
Yeah,
and it concludes really well, and I think that's a nice conclusion for our discussion here. It says, it turns out the fight about net neutrality isn't necessarily even about neutrality, at least not in the way it sometimes seems. Instead, we're sussing out where innovation begins and what government should do to encourage it. And I think that's exactly right.